Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance, Cincinnati, Ohio. We are located on Montgomery Road, just across the street from Montgomery Cyclery and up the street from the Montgomery Inn in Old Montgomery. Tonight I'm going to continue a topic called streaming, and I'm not looking at the technical side, I'm looking at it from the business side tonight. And while there is a lot of brouhaha about streaming, you really have to step back and look at the industry itself and what are its goals. And I'm very fearful that the whole intent of causing people to go to streaming has nothing to do with quality at all. There's already many stories out there about the difficulties of getting quality streaming for CD. I've done a video on that as well. And now we're talking about video and all of the potential surround approaches. And I have to think back about a couple earlier events. The introduction of compact disc, for example, where people didn't bother to get first-rate tapes, but they were happy to press CDs on any generation of tape they could find. So many of the CDs, particularly going back catalog, were pretty miserable. And then I also think about something that's occurred in another industry, which is your computer software. I'm not singling out, but it is certainly a large example of where the Microsoft Office suites, one could once buy them for $100. It was a single purchase, you were done, and away you went. Now you can't buy the software, and guess what? You have to have a monthly service charge to be able to use it, and whatever updates they provide. And what it's done is it provides the company with an unending stream of income. And I look at this now, and I look at the movie industry, and I'm reminded of the early days, particularly with Julian Varicker of Name Audio, where he did not want to foul up the performance of their AV processor. It was known as the AV1, because the software, provided to the home user was the exact same that was played in the theater. In other words, if you didn't know it, in the theater, the equalization curve is up 6 to 10 dB by the time it reaches 20,000 cycles. And if you didn't have a processor known as re-equalization to shelve that down, well, the sound you would get was pretty much like pulling dental floss between your ears. It was pretty brutal. And so in that sense, you kind of got forced into using the software needed to address what the film industry did, which was nothing for the home user. So you can't look at the movie industry and Hollywood as really looking out for your best interest all the time, because nothing's further from it. Now we see the streaming as it's growing. Some of the early things that are going on that concern me deeply are first, Netflix wanted to clean up its subscription base and essentially flush out those people who were borrowing somebody else's password and such. I understand that part, but the net effect for Netflix was to give them now 6 million more subscribers. Okay, they had a lot of cheats, I suppose. But now they've turned around, and on top of that, just last week, they've increased the subscription rate. And there are other streaming services that are likewise increasing their subscription rates. And what concerns me deeply is, without control of the software and you're having to use subscription service, well, part of it is you've now got this monthly unending cycle this automatic withdrawal from your checking account or savings account to pay for a service that you may or may not use. And you don't have a fixed rate. It's going to be going up. There's no question about that. And so you kind of get into this, where does it all end? Well, it all ends with your pocketbook. And I have some deep concerns about the fading away of actually owning the software yourself. And in this case, we'll be talking about Blu-rays. And so you don't know what quality you're being sent. And this is outside of what your service provider is capable of providing you with, your cable modem and your router, and you have no idea what they're starting with. And so while you may get an image of some quality, and I'm not going to speculate on that, I do have some real concerns about what quality the rest of it's going to be. And then there's always that lurking little problem back there, because if you look at most of your agreements for these streaming services, buried someplace in about chapter 22, page 327, is their right to sell the information of what you view or use to other people who would be interested in what you're doing or looking at. It's to the point today where you frankly can't look at one site without getting 7,000 emails from other sites of related product. So there's a whole lot of issues in there that I'm concerned about, because with this this portion where we're talking about the privacy issue, that's again an income stream to the service provider, Netflix or whomever, and so to think that streaming is necessarily the right answer, well, I'm really putting some questions out there about that. I'm not even getting into the portability of anything, and maybe everybody's using their cell phone for movies, and well, that's kind of a world I'm not into. I much prefer a much larger screen, and certainly you're not getting DTS or any form of Dolby on your cell phone. Let's forget that. And Atmos, wow, that ain't gonna happen. So I just want people to, wasn't the right word. I want people to think about this streaming. Is it the right solution? And not only for the cost of your own pocketbook, but for the quality you're going to receive. I'm just laying that out there as questions. I had a couple responses from my last one who talked about 4K and 8K for the video side, and that's another one that it just reminds me so much of a CD when you had to have how many bits and how many times over sampling and yada yada yada, and it was the race of numbers, and yet many of those systems that went outside of the Philips 16-bit structure didn't sound nearly as good as they could have. So when I see a lot of these television sets, and they're talking about higher and higher resolution, that really only becomes effective based upon your distance from the screen and the size of the screen, because there is something known as apparent resolution. Light bends and does funny things, and as well as how your eyes perceive it. And certainly when you go into a store and you're only allowed to look at 27 different sets from about 3 feet, you'll see a difference between the screens. But if you sit back to 8 to 10, 15 feet, those differences, become maybe not as good. And it doesn't say anything about black levels, lag, artifacts that are in the images, but it's this K or that K or 10,000 K or, special K, whatever. And I really worry about this race and numbers and people not paying attention to really what the goal is. And so, yeah, some of the sets can look particularly beautiful. I myself currently use a plasma. I'll be going over to an OLED at some point. But a lot of the sets I look at, the black levels are terrible, and God knows what they're broadcasting in that regard. So I just want you to think about the streaming issue. So as you see these stories come along about, well, we're not going to be selling this format anymore, any of that, it's not an endorsement of streaming. It's a recognition that it's affecting business. I guess one of the benefits of streaming is you don't have to have bookcases full of your catalog, and you're not carrying around that much. There's definitely a convenience factor to that. But I want you to be very careful in pondering, when you're looking at this, are you trading convenience for performance? And if you're performance oriented, well, there's the rub. Thank you again. Lou Hamilton from Audible Elegance. Take care.